Okay, this is the second part of the developmental lecture, part two. So here it goes. When I talk about attachment, it's basically how we form connections with other people. So many of the attachment researchers focus on the first relationship we have, which is the mother-child bond. Okay, so here I have it represented. The mother-child bond serves as a template or a model for your future relationships. And basically, if the mother-child bond over here is hunky-dory, then you're going to have a pattern of bonding that leads to successful relationships. But alternatively, if the mother-child bond, there's something wrong there, then it's going to cause you problems in your bonding patterns with people as an adult. Sigmund Freud has this theory called cupboard theory. You don't need to know this for the test, but I really like it. He thought that the mother provided food, and that if she provided enough food, the infant would be secure and they would be secure in their relationships, which I don't think the cupboard has anything to do with food. If we were in person in class, I would go off on this, but I think the cupboard has more to do with, does the mom provide nurturance, lovey-doveyness? And if she does, you'll get a sense of security in this way. And so I'll talk about cupboards as I go along, and come back to this analogy. Like one of the first things, you don't have to know this slide either, that we learn as an infant is the basic trust versus mistrust of the world. Just think about pound dogs. Their trust is broken, and once this trust cupboard kind of has an issue, then they have problems throughout the rest of their life because of the cupboard issue. I don't really like to talk about these studies, but these are the studies about the baby monkeys. Basically, Harry Harlow in these studies would take baby monkeys away from their mother during this critical time, this imprinting time. And when he separated them, he would raise them with these fake mothers you can see right here. Now, these surrogate mothers are fake mothers that he would raise them with. Sometimes were covered in wire, sometimes in cloth, sometimes they would have different bodies. But you can see in this picture that the infants really like the cloth covered surrogate, even though the wire surrogate is providing the food. And what he found is that they would prefer this cloth covered one over the food itself. And this baffled the researchers because they knew that animals sustain themselves on food, but they sometimes preferred this lovey dovey softness over the hardwire mother that provided the food. And this goes back to Freud and what I believe the cupboard has nothing to do with food, has everything to do with softness, lovey-doveyness, this idea of contact. And so when they got a choice between food and comfort, then these monkeys would pick comfort. Okay, so here's the video. I'll start.
Let me show you a monkey raised on a nursing wire mother. Now here are 106's two mothers.
You see the bottle on the
As you
left.
can see, it was weaned on a wire mother. Here's baby 106.
So it has two cupboards, a cloth covered one
Watch.
and a one with food. This goes back to Freud. Okay, they
He's
go to
going to
Freud's
the wire
cupboard.
mother. He's got to eat to live.
Oh, he's going back.
He's back on the cloth mother, and he'll stay on the cloth mother. Actually, this baby spends from 17 to 18 hours
see
a
the
day on
thumb
the cloth
sucking
mother,
just like humans
less
to
than 1 hour a
self-soothe.
day on the wire mother. We had predicted that the variable of contact comfort would be a variable of measurable importance, but we were unprepared to find that it completely overwhelmed and overshadowed all other variables, including those of nursing.
All other variables. And so it was the single most important variable was contact. So when they grew up, they took these baby monkeys, now they put them back in with regular monkeys. And what happened? They didn't know how to act. They didn't know how to interact. They were scared. They would go in the corner and hide. If they became mothers or fathers, especially mothers, they would beat their infants. And so it was really sad because they were deprived of this critical period where you get this contact with your mother, and it had detrimental effects in adulthood. Here's where I talk about preemies because back in the day, there were a lot of babies. The mortality rate in the NICU units was sky high. They had everything, just like the wire mothers. They had the respirators, they were hooked up to IVs, everything else, and they were dying. Well, back, I think about the 1970s, the nurses started doing something radical. They would just go by and pick up the little babies and cuddle and hug them. And when they would cuddle and hug them, something magic happened. The mortality rates dropped dramatically. And they call this kangaroo care. And they've started this with newborns to put on their mother's chest, skin to skin contact, because it boosts immunity and all these other positive effects come into play when you have these contact comfort and not just feeding them or hooking them up to tubes, which would be Freud's covered, like, I fed you, why aren't you doing better? And in this case, it has to do with being held. Okay, here I am back again. So Mary Ainsworth, she knew about this research and she started to apply it to humans. And so what she did is use this thing called the strange situation paradigm. You don't have to remember that per se, but it's a model to study humans. And in this strange situation model, she came up with three attachment styles, which I'll talk about here shortly. But basically, I'll mention the strange situation. It's like a living room, and you can see it here. And they'll bring the mother and the child in. Hopefully, you can see this. And then they want to just interact. There's a two-way mirror that they can look at over here from the side, and they can see how do these two people interact with each other. Is it close bond? Is it kind of standoffish, etc.? Now they'll bring a stranger in. How do you react to the stranger? Are you freaked out by strangers? Do you like strangers? And while you're not looking, the mom will sneak out. Do you have abandonment issues? Do you trip out because your mom's gone? She comes back. Now they both sneak out without you knowing. Do you do okay on your own? Like they come back in. Are you solaced by her coming back in? Things like this. And so, I don't know. I could tell stories about myself. We were in class, but I have a lot of issues. Basically, what I think it measures are two things. One, stranger anxiety. Are you freaked out by strangers? Thus, the strange situation paradigm. But also, it measures this. Oh, I have this little dog over here. You can't see him, but some dogs are really freaked out by strangers, right? I think dogs fall into one of these two categories usually, just like humans. Now, other dogs that have attachment issues have separation anxiety, like my dog. You leave him alone, he freaks out. He's like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Don't leave me alone. And so kids kind of fell into these two categories, or they were healthy. Now, I'll talk about these three categories. These aren't the names of them, but these are categories. You have kind of a clingy one over here, kind of an avoidant one over here, and right in the middle is healthy. So it has to do with the lovey-doveyness, the cupboard that I've been talking about. Sometimes it has to do with you were already born a little needy, clingy, versus a little standoffish. And so maybe it's a combination of both the mother and the kind of puppy you were, because all these puppies come from the same litter, but one might be rowdy and one might be timid right out of the womb. So here's the three styles. Secure, that's normal. You don't have to study that one. Anxious, ambivalent, this is the one I'll go into detail, but this is clingy. And the third one, avoidant, is just what it sounds like. I don't like to be around people. So I'm fixing to go through each one of these in detail on the next few slides. Okay, here we go. Hazan and Shaver, what they did, don't write any of this down, but they put three different paragraphs into a local newspaper that represented the three styles. They didn't let people know this, but you were supposed to pick the one you were. And so they wanted to see what the concentration was. Like about 56% of the people say this top one, I find it easy to get close to others. That's secure. They're not worried about being abandoned or someone getting too close to them. But in the middle is this clingy one. You don't have to remember the numbers, of course. And then at the last is the avoidant one. You can see like the blurbs, like here, I want to merge completely with another person, or here, when I am nervous when anyone gets too close. I don't want to be, close to people. And so the secure people, when they interviewed them, they felt good about themselves. They trusted others and saw the world as a good place. To me, that's rainbows and unicorns. I mean, I'd like to be like this, but it's hard. Okay. The anxious ambivalent, like I said before, anxious, they're nervous. Ambivalent means you feel two ways. What does that mean? That means, well, when your mother left, you were sad she was gone and you were mad that she left you. So you're ambivalent. You can't trust her. That's trust issues that go back to the cupboard, which is me, because a lot of what I have is a doubt myself. I feel misunderstood. I have this fear of abandonment. Sometimes my clinginess starts to drive people away, and these people end up being lonely. You can't see Elmira back here, but usually she's like hugging and squeezing the animals to death. And so, that way, if you get too thirsty, I forgot, I usually talk about, oh girl, he too thirsty, but I'm thirsty and my thirstiness drives people away. And so that song or the album, The Wall, you know what I mean? Because it's all about either I want to build a wall or it's like, Mother, do you think she's good enough for me? It's like all these different songs kind of play into this anxious ambivalence, but also the next one, Avoid. And this is the song I thought I was going to show you is Creep, Radiohead. I don't know if you know this song, but it's just like these people, that they feel misunderstood just like I. I have this quote about loving yourself, and on another day, if we were in person, I'll go into this in more detail because when you try to fix on other people, like clingy people do, like I'm going to get this person, they're going to complete me, that doesn't work. Okay, and that's why I like Cat Williams. One of his girlfriends was leaving him, and he says, "You've ruined my self-esteem." And Cat says, "I didn't ruin your self-esteem. It's called other esteem. It's not called cat esteem. It's called other esteem. So only you can ruin your self-esteem." And this is hard for me to understand because I have a lot of other esteem, and I wish we had more time to talk about this. This is from ACOA, but I love this because I don't want to audition for other people hoping they'll see my worth. And this is my problem because I do audition for other people hoping they'll see my worth. And this is the anxious ambivalent kind of cross. Okay, so avoidance. Avoidant, just like they sound, they're standoffish. They don't want to be around people. You know, people like this, like screw people. Everybody's a jerk. Fuck everybody. And so when they shut down like this, I think I have over here, it's me against the world. So fuck everybody. If I can just like build this big wall, Pink Floyd, then everybody will just leave me alone and I'll be safe and secure. Now, this is where I usually talk about different combinations of people. If you get a secure person with a secure person, it's ideal because they both are confident in themselves, they trust people, and so everything is hunky dory. Get a secure person with an anxious ambivalent, the anxious ambivalent becomes like this little vampire, and the secure person runs away. Why? Because they need, and they just keep draining the person of energy. I don't know if you've seen this movie, but it does have a vampire motif, and he does drain people of energy, and he has to come to grips. Now, on the third case, if you get an anxious ambivalent with an avoidant, it seems like a match made in hell because you got the needy person with the person that likes to run away. But a lot of times that's a power play on the avoidance person's part. And this is why I like teaching this stuff because you can see every time someone has problems in relationships, it's one of the people has one of these disorders, that need to come to grips with better experience. Now, if you get two needy people together, then they're like one person. That's why I have a little cocoon. I don't know if you can tell this, but they cocoon themselves off from the world and just make their own little universe. Okay, this is the last section in development. I really like talking about moral development, and this part sucks because I can't be in class and have a dialogue. Now, a lot of people don't think you're born with a sense of right and wrong, and I kind of agree with that. Although, whatever, given my theory with this too, that you know what's right in your heart because God has written it in there, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Hindu, whatever, you have this sense within you, but scientists tend to argue the opposite. You know what I mean? That we have to learn, thus the term moral development, how to be. And I have this quote to counteract, that Christian quote I had. It's like, we're the only species that can kill millions of people because they don't believe like us.
Heinz's Dilemma.
Okay, this is Heinz's dilemma. I'm gonna pause it for a second and then show you this dilemma, and this is how he came up with his three stages.
Heinz's wife is dying because of a special kind of cancer. There's only one drug that the doctors think might save her. It is a new formula which a pharmaceutical company in the same town has recently discovered. The drug is very expensive to produce, but the company is charging 10 times the production cost. Heinz goes to everyone he knows to borrow money, but he can only collect half of what the drug costs. He tells the CEO of the company that his wife is dying and asks him to sell it for less so if he could pay at a later time. But the CEO refuses. He can make no exceptions. The research had been very expensive and the company needs to turn in a profit. What should happen next?
So this is what he would ask little kids, old people, every kind of person he could find. And then he found three common categories of responses. It's not really, a lot of people say they steal the drug, but it's not really if you steal it. It's your rationale for stealing it. Like, I can't watch my wife die versus the crime of stealing versus, oh, those guys are being jerks. I should just steal the drug. Comes up with these three. Oh, I forgot. I had John Q on here. He basically has to break in on this movie to a hospital and hold the doctors at gunpoint to cure his child because they won't, the insurance won't, pay for it or something. Kohlberg comes with these three stages: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. So a caveat, which means warning. I'm going to show a lot of writing on the next three slides, but I'm just going to come boil it down. Number one means this, number two means that, and number three means this. Conventional and pre-conventional morality, you either obey the rules to avoid, getting punished or because you'll get a reward. Now, I don't see this as morality because you're just kind of saving your own ass. It's like you can tell me to do anything and I'll get rewarded or punished. You could reward me for hurting people. So in this case, pre-conventional, I don't want you to write this, just concerned about feeling good or kind of preserving myself. And so that's real primal kind of morality. Even my dog has that kind of morality. He won't do something if he knows he's going to get kenneled up. Kind of morality is conventional. Conventional, which means normal, usual. I obey the rules because either other people will like me or I don't want other people to reject me. Now, this to me is social morality because it's nothing about doing the right thing. It's just I don't want other people to see me in a certain light. I call it saving face or concerned about looking good. Really think about, certain periods of history in our time. It's like this is what Martin Luther King says. It's not the bad people that he was so concerned about during this history of civil strife. It's the good people that were being really quiet because they didn't want to be seen in a certain light, and therefore they would be socially ostracized, not physically hurt. Now, if I can go to the next one, I don't know if you've read The Scarlet Letter, but Hester Prynne, she's not hurt physically, but this big red A on the front of her dress, she is shamed, slut shamed back in the day for being, promiscuous with a man. Now, we shamed people in other ways, but if shaming has taken new, avenues like on Easy A or other movies, now we have cyber shaming. And so a lot of this is the way, this morality is kind of dished out. Okay, last one, post-conventional. The individual obeys rules because not only they're not good maybe for me personally, but the bigger society. For instance, affirmative action for me. It's better for the bigger society that more non-white people be in positions of power, but it's not good for me personally. I do believe in it. That's just me. But in stage six, you just follow your heart. You follow your heart, your conscience. And we'll talk about this later on when I get into probably talking about Henry David Thoreau and other people. Okay, I hope, but this is all being concerned about doing the right thing. And so, what Martin Luther King says is a lot of times cowardice is asking, is it safe? Expediency is asking, is it political? It's going to help me out. Is it popular? But conscious asks the question, is it right? And you just have to do the right thing, regardless of the consequences. That's why I like this quote from the movie The Weatherman. I don't know if you can see it good or not, but usually the harder thing to do and the right thing to do in life, they're the same thing. The easy thing to do is and so I don't know if you've seen this movie. I might have talked about it already. Silence. A lot of times, are you going to be silent when it comes to do the right thing, to stand up for what you believe in? And this is what Martin Luther King says. Never, never be afraid to do what is right, especially if the well-being of a person or animal is at stake. Society's punishments are small compared to the wounds we inflict on our soul when we look the other way, the price of silence. I hope that this lecture was good for you. Let me know if you have any questions.